It's over there?
Oh, yeah.
It's next to Irving gas station.
Yeah.
Welcome most of them.
Because you didn't get the order anything on us, and we'll take care of it. Yes, sir.
Doing what?
They're doing some footage.
Send me a few of those. So you're gonna put them on the paper?
Yeah, what I'm gonna do is,
She's past that.
shut it off.
Like some science this time, but I don't remember what.
She
She
was
was in the program at the high school where they went to the college, so she's now at the end of her, near the end of their sophomore.
Yeah, okay, but here it, okay, well,
You'll be more want to feed you too, so. Yeah,
okay.
yeah, her name's Georgiana. I think they even write that down.
Phil, get this on
And that's her
camera.
name.
Yeah, they can change it. I'll have to keep my, I'm sure I'll be soon.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, Phil.
Hey, we went to my house in Edmiston.
Yeah. Jeez. We'll see how long it was.
I think it is. I don't know.
Oh, it's on the,
Well, it's past the,
Oh, there's been, well, almost certain. And recent.
I think if I can do a grilled chicken.
Yeah, is that right? Next,
Okay, just now?
so we like you so much, we get a reservation.
I did.
no, I'm actually from Toronto. But I haven't been home in 4 years. Given myself talk about showing up the Labrador coast, doing some research.
Anything else? All right.
I've heard it really good, yeah, because I've done the animal something. I mean, for now, maybe not the good ones. Some of the others. She likes to get. I have plant tests. People without
Chicken breast, and it comes with sausage and lettuce, and then they serve it, it's like a breading oven, and they serve it with like the white bread. It is, they let us go, and it is very, yeah, anything else?
This is how things really
You
work.
guys all set? Yeah, my husband is like.
You already decided what you want.
Anyway, Mo's wife, his widow, brought this over one day, and I brought it over to the club, and it's really quite a gavel. It's got a long history, and I don't know all of the history. And I don't know, Ron, if you know any of the history, or Phil?
It looks like the same thing they use at the Knights of Columbus.
Well, maybe our Rotarians were very good at, what's the word, thievery? I don't know, but anyway. Listen, I want to welcome our honored guests. We expected more people this evening, but due to conflicts of interest and bad weather and what have you, you folks deserve a medal for being here with your child also. That's great. So welcome. A Rotary round of applause.
She likes to clap. One of her.
She's allowed.
Yeah.
Well, we want to welcome you,
Thank you.
and recognize you. This is one of our used to be one of our hallmark activities. We invite new educators from kindergarten teacher to college professor. Anybody that was new, not necessarily to the community, but new in the educational profession, we would bring into the community, talk, have a guest speakers. We do. We have a very good speaker, Dr. Dixon, this evening. He'll charm you with his words of wisdom. And we also have a video which will tell you all a lot more about us. And so we look forward to having you share that video with us in a few minutes. Right now, I would ask everybody to stand, and Phil, would you please give us the Pledge of Allegiance? And the flag is right to my right here. Thank you, Phil.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please remain standing. I'll ask Wally to do the invocation.
Lord, we ask for the blessings on this food. We ask for your blessings that we can do the work for our community. We thank you for this wonderful day and make us mindful of the needs of others. Amen. Amen.
Now what we're going to do, we're going to go around the table, and this is for the benefit of our guests. We're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to tell you what we either do or what we did for many years. And we'd like to hear from you also. You can tell us a little about yourself as we get to know you and you know us, okay? All right. So let's start with the Melvins.
I'm Bill Melvin. This is my wife, Helen. For 30 years, I worked with Customs and Border Protection here in Fort Kent. My wife spent 37 years in education as a second grade teacher in both Montford and St. Agathe and Dr. Levesque in Frenchville. Originally, my introduction to Rotary came 40 years ago when I sat in your place. I was a new teacher here in Fort Kent, and I was invited to one of these sit-down get-togethers. And it was very good because it allowed me to make contacts in the community, some very good ones that helped with my classroom activities. So take a look at these faces, get used to them, because if they can help in any way, they will, because our motto is service above self. So if we can help, we're good.
Thank you.
My name is Ron Garrity. I've been with here for many, many years. I'm retired from the grocery business. Our family had 6 supermarkets in the state of Maine. And this is my wife, Joanne. And she's also a member.
And yes. And by the way, I was talking a while ago to Peter and his wife, and they know what I've done.
Well, we don't.
Too bad, Walt, too bad.
Marty, take your gavel over there in that corner.
Okay.
I'm Rita Canan, and I am retired from business. I owned BJ's for 34 years, and I organized the Can-Am sled dog races for 20 years. And now I gallivant the country. And I'm also a secretary for the Rotary Club.
For life.
Yeah.
My name is John LeBrie. I'm the health educator. I work for Northern Maine General and been Rotarian for 13 years right now. Past president, presently vice president. We recycle things, you know. And I want to welcome you here because we start off the season for Rotary with welcoming the educators. We end the season by honoring honor students at community high school. So we're really big about education and really, you know, making sure that our students and our faculty here get the right tools and knowledge and so forth. So, welcome.
I think I've been Peter and Sarah, dear friends of my son, but I'm Ben Parody, and I've only been a Rotarian for 3 years. It seems like 30 with these guys. It seems like I've been here forever. It's a wonderful group to be with. And I got introduced to Rotary many years ago because my brother-in-law was in charge of the partridge fry, right? And I used to hunt in those days, so every time I come back with a couple of birds, he always say, hey, I need those. And so there was a competition between who would get the most partridge for their fry. I've been teaching in Fort Kent since 1967 at the high school, physics, and at the university since 1972. So, welcome aboard, Peter.
Thanks.
Teach us in the same department as
It's my pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Robert Dixon. Dr. Dixon has been part of the educational system his whole life. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Physics and Mathematics with high honors. He holds a Master of Science in Nuclear Physics and holds a PhD in Theoretical Nuclear Physics. Dr. Dixon began his career as a professor, and he worked his way up to department chair, dean, vice president, and provost. As well, he served as director of a private sector engineering firm. Since January of 2014, and most fortunately for UMFK, Dr. Dixon has served as vice president for academic affairs.
Talk about yourself too.
Okay, I'll do that. And I should mention, and Dr. Dixon's going to be talking a little later on, despite the fact that I only asked him late yesterday afternoon, Dr. Dixon has graciously accepted to speak to everyone later tonight. And so please welcome Dr. Dixon. And Peter and myself are colleagues. We work in botany and environmental studies. And
biology.
Whatever. And we'll be working very closely in a lot of different classes and things like that. But I'm going on 12 years in Rotary. And I've loved every minute of it. My initiation was to work as a chaperone at the high school dances at the Legion. Thanks, Marty. And I've enjoyed it. We've done a lot of unique, community service and things like that. So I've enjoyed it, and it's a great, fabulous group of people here.
Thank you, Steve. I'm Marty Bernstein, and I joined this club back in 1984 when I moved here from Buffalo, New York, to manage the hospital. I worked at the hospital for about 28 years, retired 3 years ago, and retirement is great, but when the time is appropriate, of course. It's a great community. You'll find that you'll be very welcome. Even though I'm not a native of Fort Kent, I've always felt that I was able to assimilate very easily, and people here are very friendly. And you can be as active or inactive in the community as you like, which is kind of nice. There are a lot of things, and the two things about Fort Kent that I always rave about, the college, of course. We're blessed to have a college, so we have some culture, some theater, some music, some educational programs, sporting activities. But we also have the hospital, where I worked for 28 years. It's a nice little hospital, good medical care, and there are a lot of one-horse towns in northern Maine that would love to have either or, and we have both, so we're blessed. And I've been recycled, as somebody mentioned earlier. I was president back in the 80s, and we all take turns. It's a small club, and we all take turns being president. But you're going to hear from Dr. Dixon, and then you're going to hear from the Melvins. They put together a video of Rotary, Fort Kent Rotary, and what we've done over the years. I think you'll leave with an appreciation for service above self, the motto that Bill mentioned, in terms of what we've done and what we continue to do. We're a small group, and I like to tell people we've lost members over the years, but the same functions we provided with 30 members, we now provide with 13 members. The division of labor has changed, but we're still out there for the community, contributing in any way we can. Welcome. I'm glad you both, all three of you, are with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you and hearing from you over the years. Wally?
My name is Wally Desjardins, or Desjardins, whatever you want to say. My wife Sandy. We're back in Fort Kent for 10 years now. We were in New Jersey for about 45 years or so. Been a Rotarian for 42 years. 10 of them are here in Fort Kent, which is great. And manufactured some medical equipment, the business in New Jersey, sold everything and came home. So we're happy we're here, and we're happy you're here. Good to see you, Pete. Thanks.
Well, I'm Bob Desjardins, Wally, big brother. I've been in Rotary now for 5 years. Almost 6, they say. I know Wally has been involved in Rotary for, as he said, many, many years. And it's, while he was in the early years, I was involved in other volunteer work and so on. And I retired from Unisys out of Blue Bell, Pennsylvania. My wife, Betty, a former Deltel engineer and educator, math and physics and so on. basically. There's a lot more, but I'll move forward.
Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome to the community.
And we're going to ask you, if you don't want to tell us a little about yourself.
Sure.
Family.
Well, I'll stand up as it seems that's the tradition. So I'm Peter Nelson, and this is my wife Larissa and our daughter Amara, who is almost 13 months old. And I am originally from South Dakota, and Larissa is actually originally from Maine, from the Augusta area. And I am basically a botanist, if you had to give me one title. I've worked all around the North American continent studying plants, mostly Alaska, also in Chile though. And I guess my interests are the stuff that you probably think of as moss, but it's actually lichen. The stuff that the caribou eat, that's kind of what I study. You may know Dr. Selva. Ironically, we both study the same organisms. But I teach biology, environmental studies, and botany here. We arrived in mid-August. Yeah, so we arrived in mid-August, and we're actually really enjoying being here. We've lived in Oregon, which is where I did my PhD at Oregon State University. And people here have been really very friendly to us, and the landscape is really a beautiful place. We like to go outdoors, we like to run, we like to ski, and so we're looking forward to the winter. And Larissa is a middle school science teacher. She did her master's degree also at Oregon State University, and she's teaching as a part of the new charter school that's online. So she was fortunate to be the only employee they allowed to not actually work in Portland. So she's the one Aroostook County representative, which is actually turning out to be a bit of a benefit for them. So we're very pleased to have been invited, and we look forward to seeing all of you around now that we know who you are and you know who we are. For those of you who we don't already know. So thank you for inviting us.
Phil, we save the best for last, okay?
In front of the camera.
Last guy to do a selfie. Hi there. I'm Phil Susi. Thank you. I'm a retired investment advisor. I retired 10 years ago. Now I'm doing volunteer work with WFK TV, which is public access television. And from Allagash to Grand Falls. Not Grand Falls, I got that wrong. Grand Isle, it's close. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Okay, we'll proceed with our meal, and then after the meal we'll have Dr. Dixon, and then we'll have our video, and we'll be all set. So everybody dig in.
That's good. Is it always this tight? I'll give you more room. No, I'm good. I'm good. I just wondered about it. Well, good evening. Good evening to all of you. I'm delighted to be with you. And when Dr. Hanson approached me yesterday, or sent word that he needed me to do this, I immediately said yes. But then I looked at my calendar and found that I was supposed to be at another dinner tonight with the Division of Education. And so I spoke with the president, and he said he was going to that one, and so I should come here. So if the evening doesn't go well, blame President Harris. I've spent my career, with the exception of about 3 years, in higher education. For about 3 years I worked with an engineering firm. And that was a challenge because scientists and engineers take very different views of the world. And scientists can tolerate problems that have no practical application. And engineers, of course, find that really bothersome. As a teacher, I've always wanted my students to succeed. And I've done quite a bit, I guess, to help my students succeed. I followed some of them to graduate school, even interfered with some of their research and tried to talk to their professors about giving them another chance. And I used to always think that the students in my courses would benefit. They would leave with something positive. And if those that didn't leave with anything positive, I thought they'd be left okay. That is, either it was going to be a plus or a zero. Because they had been around me, I thought the pluses would be very high. And those who just couldn't do the work, I thought they'd leave with a zero. But I have a colleague who works in New York. He's in philosophy. And he makes the argument that in many cases, the classroom encounter can leave a student worse off. That there are negatives that the student can leave with. We seem to operate that on the premise that when we teach a student, if they learn the principles, learn the laws, learn the theorems, gain the knowledge, they're better off. And we never think that when we get the results and the student doesn't do well on the exams, doesn't do well in writing the papers, well, we think that the student still is okay. And we never think that a possible encounter with us can leave a negative mark, can actually leave that student worse off. So that notion has been rather sobering for me, and it caused me to think back to some of my teaching. And as I was sitting here, I thought about what I was going to say to you this evening. And so what I hope is that I will not leave you worse off. Okay? And of course, at one point in my life, I was so arrogant, I never would have thought that way. I would have thought that you have to gain, you know. But, and I think that that entire notion, which I picked up a few years ago, had great influence over my approach to teaching and how I interacted with students in the courses that I taught subsequently. Well, what I want to talk to you briefly about, just some random remarks about higher education and the funding of higher education, how we finance higher education. You know, in 2008, we had this economic decline. The housing market collapsed. There were many bad loans that had been made. This collapse, which took place in financial markets, actually was worldwide. And it created a great many problems in higher education. Now, it didn't all occur in 2008. Actually, the effects were felt in the fall of '09, primarily because the classes that were entering had already been made for the fall of 2008 when things went bad. The effect of the financial problem actually posed difficulties for both private and public institutions. On the private side, the endowments lost a lot of money, which challenged, private institutions who counted on something like 15, maybe even as high as 20% of the budget coming from endowments. On the public side, the state appropriations went way down, and institutions were challenged. And in some cases, faculty members were let go, programs closed, some staff members were let go, and this happened in a great many states. Now, some of the private institutions that had strong reserves actually were able to offer more discounts that is more scholarships, in order to keep the population, the student enrollment, just about the same. But many of the public institutions initially had some enrollment declines. Now the interesting thing about it is that once the economy starts to improve, when you look at public education, you didn't find the states responding with more funding. As a matter of fact, what you found was that in many states, the funding actually continued to go down. That is, the percent of the budget that came from state appropriations in many states continued to decline. Now, there are a lot of, I suppose there are a lot of reasons for that. Certainly demographics played a big role. But there is I think the notion among some folks in politics and some governors that the appropriations for the public institutions had always been too high, and that those institutions needed to do more in terms of generating their own revenue. And so that decline sort of just continued to go down. Now, many private institutions suffered, and I'm not talking about the very well-off private institutions, but those who have aspirations. You know, some of what people would call the second-tier liberal arts colleges. Many of them, you know, in higher education, we think of 4 tiers. We think of the nationally known research universities. There are about 200 of those, and they're always ranked from 1 to 200. And then we think of the so-called second-tier national universities, and those don't get ranked, but they just always get listed alphabetically. And then there are the first-tier liberal arts colleges, and there are about 200 of those that get ranked. And then the so-called second-tier liberal arts colleges, and those don't get ranked. They're just listed generally. But we think of those 4 tiers. But generally, those institutions that were in that second tier of the liberal arts colleges tried to respond by discounting, offering more discounts, which of course made budgets very, very tight and made things a little difficult. For them. Now, these difficulties have caused many people to think that, well, we need to rethink how we finance education, what we do to support our institutions. Now, some institutions, of course, have the ability to raise more money because they have wealthy alumni and they can always respond. Many institutions are not in that position. Back I think it was last November, there was an article that was published in the New York Times, and the authors of that article, a fellow by the name of Christensen and I think Knowles was the second author, but they wrote this article in which they were arguing about or making contentions about how institutions needed to change, how they needed to be more flexible, and how they needed to respond to changing markets and changing opportunities. Now, in writing this article, it was interesting that they tried to draw a parallel between some other technological developments and there's hormones and recent technical developments. They pointed out that the steam engine actually came on the scene in the early 1800s, and the steam engine was used to propel a ship down the Hudson back around 1807. and they talked about how the large sailing ocean-going ships responded to that. Many ignored it, didn't see the potential in the use of steam, and thought that there were too many problems involved with trying to use steam in order to propel ships. But later in the century, a few responded, and what they did was to create these hybrid systems where they would try to use sails and steam in combination. But they always thought that having sails would never go away. But by the early 1900s, those companies that used sails were completely out of business. Okay, and the authors contend that what they had failed to do was to recognize the power of this innovation, the steam engine. And they contended that what many higher education institutions are guilty of is not recognizing the power of online education, and that we're not taking advantage of online education in the right way. And they claim that, like some of those ocean-going ships that relied on sails, that many of our institutions will not be around 15 years from today. That many of them will either merge or go out of business. It's a fairly interesting notion. One of the things that I can see is that we do struggle with the use of online education, how best to use it, what opportunities it really presents, and what form it ought to take. Now, some of the for-profit institutions, of course, rely heavily on online education. I think that what the authors of that article have done is fairly interesting, but I don't agree with the conclusion. They actually conclude that 25% of the lower tier institutions, that 25% of each tier, the bottom group, will disappear in the next 15 years or merge. I don't think that's the case. One of the things is that people go to schools for very different reasons. They don't all go to school, for the same kind of thing. If one wants to be a civil engineer, then having a laboratory space in order to learn about concrete, in order to learn about what happens to it, in order to learn about the strength of materials, all that's very, very important. And that doesn't lend itself. I would not want to go to a doctor who had been educated online. That way I would find that extremely frightening. So I do not see myself that online education will ever displace the bricks and mortar institutions, but I do see that we'll learn how to make good use of, or better use than we currently do. I know that one of the things that will happen, and I don't think it has anything to do with online education, that many of our institutions will close. Many of our institutions are not competitive or don't have the wherewithal to become competitive. And in particular, I've spent a great deal of my time working in historically black institutions. And some of those institutions, during this crisis, this economic crisis, have had great difficulties because many of the private ones have not been able to hold the students. And that's because their families can't afford the tuition and fees when there are nearby public institutions where they can go for a third of the cost. So it becomes just an economic argument. And although people go to institutions for other reasons, they go for social reasons, they go because mother and father went to this particular institutions. When it comes down to whether you have enough money or you don't have enough money, in many cases you have to opt for what you can afford. And so that's going to be the primary factor that's going to lead many of the historically black institutions to probably close in the next quarter of the century. Now, many of the public ones, of course, have already made a transition. When you look at places like Lincoln University in Lincoln, Missouri, which is probably now approaching 50% white, or you look at places like Bluefield State in Virginia, which already now is majority white institutions, or you look at Tennessee State, where the white population, in Nashville, where the white population has been growing. Many of those publics, of course, are going to be around, and they're going to look very, very different in the future. But some of the privates are going to find it extremely difficult to survive, just like some of the majority institutions, private institutions, are also going to find it very difficult to survive for the same reasons, and that's independent of being able to exploit online education. Because in many instances, when you say, online education cannot be the panacea for those institutions because they can't compete with the privates. One of the reasons they can't compete with the privates is because they want to be whole. They want to offer everything. They want the student to have a broad experience. So they want to have a band, they want to have athletic programs, they want to have good running laboratories, and many of the for-profit institutions are single focus. So if you can't get what you want at one, you can get it at another, or at least they advertise those things that way. So it will be difficult for many of those institutions to compete. And of course, many of the current for-profits are also going to not be able to survive. And one of the things that's going to make it difficult for them is that many of them have been extremely dishonest in the way they operate because of financial aid. Now, interestingly, these guys who wrote this article in the New York Times, they say that market factors would already have moved us closer to the point that the ocean-going sailing ships found themselves in at the turn of the 20th century, that we'd be closer to that kind of situation were it not for federal aid, that the federal aid has actually interfered with the market working in just the right way because it made money available to some of the for-profits, and of course it distorted everything because they've been able to go out and do some very dishonest things that cause them to have difficulty with accreditation and with the federal government. You may not know the stories, but in many cases they've been guilty of actually sending in financial aid forms with the names of folks that they went and copied from the local cemetery, just in order to get the funding. Or they'll take and promise students that, well, you can be an engineer if you come here, you can be a great scientist, all you got to do is take our courses, we're going to put you in the right courses. And of course the students in many cases don't have the right backgrounds, don't have the preparation to compete, and so they stay for a short period of time and then they leave. So many of those institutions are going to fade also. But the other thing that's going to drive some of them to fade is that many of them have investors. They have a lot of investors, And what those investors have been promised profit. And so the boards on those institutions are under pressure to return a certain level of profit. And so in many cases where they could remain in the black in terms of operating, they don't end up in the black, they end up in the red because they've got to try to meet those obligations. They've got to try to have decent dividends so that they can be, investors will remain, I guess, calm and not make demands, about the return that they were promised on their investments. So those are some of the difficulties, I guess, that we face today in higher education with respect to finance. I guess you're aware that in our system here in Maine, because of projected finances or decline in finances, decline in support for higher education, because of the decline in the school-age population, that we have to make certain adjustments. And our approach to doing that is to try to figure out how we can collaborate, how we can cooperate more in order to reduce costs. And of course that's a challenge. That's a challenge because that model doesn't exist. And so one is not certain about how it's going to look in the future, and one is certainly not certain about what the savings will be, what we'll be able to achieve. It could be that collaborating with respect to some programs will bring about a certain level of savings, and it could be that it won't happen. It won't happen that way. But certainly, I think we are obligated to make the effort. One of the things that we want to do, certainly bringing it home to a local level, is we want to make certain that the programs that we have at the University of Maine at Fort Kent remain whole, that we don't lose anything, that we don't suffer any losses. And actually, we would like to see some of what we offer strengthened. Now, I know that when I make those kind of arguments, people look at me strangely because, we're supposed to be in a kind of slash mode and looking for what we can cut. But I'm looking for what we can maintain and strengthen, because my commitment is to make certain that what we offer will allow our students the opportunity, once they graduate, to be able to compete. And that is to compete wherever they choose to go, and whatever they choose to do. But we are in that mode of looking to find what we can cut and what we can collaborate on, or what programs should be collapsed. Now, this is not unique to Maine. This is going on around the country. And many states many states have certain rules that they follow with respect to what programs are going to be cut. And generally, those that do not produce a sufficient number of graduates are eliminated automatically. And of course, it's an easy thing for many persons to do, especially when there's no one in the room who understands that cutting a particular program can have other kinds of ramifications and can actually limit your potential to do other things, because a given program at an institution always will be connected in a lot of different ways to other programs, and having a person in a particular discipline can give you a certain potential to do things that you won't have if you cut that program. But a lot of times when people get into the cutting mode, what they think is that, well, here's a program with just a few graduates, we should cut it. And that's a very simple-minded thing, because you don't have to think about the consequences of that particular action. And so like many of my colleagues and many other places, that are public, we're involved with trying to see what we can salvage as we move forward in higher education. Because my commitment, when I started this kind of work, my commitment was always to try to have the strongest institution possible. And I never thought that I would come to a particular point in time when these rationales for cutting and these rationales for program elimination would be so prevalent, not just in one state, but across the country. The one thing I know that we can be certain of, and it'll be one of the challenges that all institutions will face, public institutions, is that states are going to make the appropriations smaller and smaller as time goes forward. I know I have a colleague at the University of Oregon who told me that the University of Oregon now receives a little less than 5% of its budget from state appropriations. When I was in Louisiana, when I got there back in 2004, the state appropriation at the school where I was working was something around 45–46%. When I left, it was around 30% back in 2010, and I'm told today it's about 20%, and there's a chance that it could go lower. And that's the mode we're in. And so many institutions have to think in terms of generating revenue. And of course that's something which is that's a very different way of thinking for many of my colleagues, but I think it's going to be absolutely necessary as we move to the future. The one thing that I would say to you is that all institutions need support. And I would encourage you, wherever you graduated from, wherever you finished from, whatever institution you feel a loyalty for, is that you should try to support that institution financially. And that's the thing that will help institutions survive in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dixon. This is an excellent program, and I think you've given us some insight to what to expect looking down the road. We're in very challenging times, for sure. I'd like to call on Bill Melvin and Helen Melvin, whomever, to introduce our video. And this is something I think that will give you some insight to what we do as a club and what we've done historically.
And I should apologize, my wife had to go. It's bedtime for the baby.
Oh, absolutely. No apologies necessary. We've all been there, done that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mr. President, in the interest of time, I think we can do this event at another time. Invite them back if they'd like to see it. The video itself is more or less, it was a Valentine's Day remembrance that we put together of past members, which you have no connection with them and don't know anything about them. A lot of it's going to be very dull to begin with. But it does outline our projects that we've worked on, and it can run for 45 minutes, which I hope if you would like to do it. But I'm just saying in the way of the fact that some people have young ones that are leaving, and I'd like to have you come back sometime after and look at this, but if you don't mind.
No, I think that's a great idea. I think we will invite our guests back for a second time and a second meal, and we'll devote the entire program to the video.
In lieu of the video, can you just maybe tell me about maybe two projects that you guys do? Since I'm actually I've seen Rotary symbol around, but I was looking at your flyer just as a stand-in for stuff that you do. I heard about the high school honors list, and then the Hunter's dinner, breakfast.
I'd like to tell everybody that this club has been here in Fort Kent since 1926. So we have had our input into many things that are around. This winter you'll see the skating rink which Rotary took under its wing. the ski tow, which is another thing. Our president went to Vermont to pick up the first ski tow that we had. We get involved internationally with clean water and outdoor facilities for many countries. Right now we're starting to get interested in something called shelter boxes. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but that was a concept that the Canadian government put together where they said instead of just sending food and things to people, why don't we pack them into something they can actually live in? So a shelter box goes out to many areas. In Haiti recently, I think they put in something like 150 shelter boxes into Haiti, full of supplies. And from that concept has grown to now, besides shelter and food, they're putting out educational materials in these. So if your country is in need of school supplies or computer things, there are different types of shelter boxes that can go out. It's a very interesting concept and one we're really looking to get involved in. But as you go through Fort Kent, you're going to see we've been involved with the hospital buying EKG monitors, buying equipment for the hospital, respirators for the fire department and the jaws of life. We get involved in the street lights was one of our last projects on Main Street because the fire department sits off of Main Street and their equipment has to enter Main Street, so we have a light put up that activates when they leave the fire department. So whatever it is that Fort Kent has a need for, we try to fill. We look at a number of different ideas each year, and from that we build our project. John mentioned it, we're very big in education. We've always been big in education. Wally has a program where we give dictionaries to every third grade student in Fort Kent. Some people look at that and say that's a very outdated concept, not what they have. Our feeling is that you learn so much more by having that dictionary in your hands, how to break down words, how to use synonyms and antonyms, and how to get involved in finding information rather than waiting for a computer to get it for you. So there are a number of different avenues. Sometime when you come in, you'll get to see that.
Hey, we also have a Little League team we support and buy the uniforms for. We're very involved with raising money for some of the projects that Bill mentioned. We have food courts. We serve hot dogs and things like that. We just had one not so long ago for an antique car show during the homecoming weekend at the college. There's just a whole bunch of things. Plus we also do the Can-Am races, the sled dog races. We're involved with that. We're involved with a lot of good things for the community, and we certainly all believe in our motto, which somebody mentioned earlier, service above self.
Last year was...
Wally's, by the way, was a district governor in New Jersey, so he was also president of New Jersey, but a district governor has a whole district, so he's Mr. Rotary in our eyes. He's had the experience. Go ahead, Wally.
The nice thing that we did last year, which just started to make it an annual thing, is the college gave a $1,000 scholarship to the students if you went to Fort Kent. So we decided, and then John was very much involved with that, to push that. We decided we would match that $1,000. So we did it for the first time last year. We'll do it again next spring and keep it going, because the one student, of course we have about 16 students with their parents, and bring them out to dinner and everything else, and we give them a scholarship. On top of that, we added the $1,000 scholarship for the student that we feel is the best to go. So that worked out great.
Yeah, we recognize scholarship here, which, it's a small community and everybody is into sports and they're into a lot of different things, but we're always into the scholarship thing. Does anybody else want to make any comments? Go ahead, John.
We're a small club. We don't have the quantity that we used to have. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. And like Marty said, we've been able to maintain what we did in the past with a smaller group. And I think it's benefited the community. the scholarship that we provide for the students. I mean, every honor student, you know, at the community high school that attends our dinner at the end, plus we feed the parents and so forth, they walk away with a scholarship. They know it. And we started with the $1,000 for the University of Maine Fort Kent for a student that goes there, and word has gotten out. We get a lot of interest. People are going to start going in that direction. So, like I said, we're not a big club, but I think we've got a lot going for us.
Maybe in the future, you know, I'm new here, but I mean, I have a lot of ambition to make my, not make my mark, but bring my vision to my little world and have ideas about community service and turning the classes that I teach into the vision, my vision. And I've always been involved with communities, whether as a volunteer firefighter or as a EMT volunteer. There you go, John. But I would, so maybe perhaps in the future there will be occasion to work together as I become more, or you know.
You've just been hired.
Well,
yeah.
I'm also CEO for a ambulance service, so you can definitely talk.
Yeah, well, I've been expired for a while. Yeah.
Give him time to be here a while.
We have here one of the most successful volunteer ambulance services.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable we've been able to hold it together as long as we have John's the leader, and it's quite a program. And, sure is. I want to thank John and also Steve for coordinating this program. They did a lot behind the scenes to make it happen. I'm sorry our attendance wasn't any better tonight, but those things happen. But we're delighted that you joined us with your wife and child. And I know we'll have you back, and certainly if you get settled, don't be surprised if somebody comes knocking at your door and saying, hey, would you like to join the Rotary Club? We've been known to do that before. Does anybody else have...
Well, I think we should invite them to attend Rotary anytime.
Yeah. As you go, absolutely. Well, Steve is very active in Rotary.
Thursday night. Yeah, when I first joined Rotary, I couldn't cook, and now I'm cooking burgers and everything. Hot dogs. Marty has done a wonderful job.
Well, hey, we're gonna. Ben, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. Have you had a chance to talk to your wife about
Get it all figured out.
Okay. She's sending us to McDonald's, is that what?
No, it's better than that. We're all going to meet at the center. We're going to have popcorn and soda and watch a movie.
All right, that's wonderful.
I'm just kidding.
No.
We're going to have a turkey feed again.
All right, but we're going to contribute to this thing. We'll bring either food or money. I think we know we should do it.
We're going to bring Ron's wines.
Yeah. Oh, Ron's wines. Good. Thank you. And you got the date on there. That's, what date did we, that's got to be the first Thursday, because we're just going to be going. We want to be here.
December 6th.
December 6th. Good. Thank you. Thank you. That's good. We'll get back. Thank you very much.
All right.
Yes.